All right, and welcome to Social Biology. I am your co-host, Jeremy.
I am Morgan. Very excited to be here.
Yes, as usual. We both are. You don't own the being excited. I'm excited too.
I look forward to these. I'm excited to be learned.
I am not an educator. I could never be a teacher.
Well, to an adult male like me, it's probably easier than to a child or a high school student. But
I think for me, it comes down more to ability to learn. I get really frustrated easily when people don't understand what I think are very simple concepts, but in reality are not very simple.
Yeah, they're simple to you. So like it's a question of patience and understanding others' abilities.
Yeah, I'm not very empathetic.
Yeah.
I don't care if people are struggling.
Yeah,
they're failures.
You're a sociopath. So no, I'm just kidding.
I remember my brother. He has a master's degree in biology education.
Oh, really?
And so. Yeah, so he, there was a time where he was taking some, I would say similar classes, but he had some classes that had barely had to take any math because that's how it was. And in my major, I did. And one time he comes to me, he's like, well, I have a problem with this particular, homework assignment. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down and maybe I can help you figure it out. And I sat down with him and for me, it was something I'd learned several years ago. And so I'm like, well, you have to do this. He's like, what's that? I'm like, I'm not going to explain it to you. I'll just do it for you. And so I just did it for him. Like, so here you go. Here's the answer.
So he got nothing out of you.
Yeah, you better learn it yourself because I tried for like a second to explain. And I was like, I can't. I'm not going to give you a 2-hour course on, stereochemistry or things like that. So
I wish I had friends like that to do homework.
I don't know. Well, I guess this is a thing. When my older brother he's 2 years older than me. When he was in high school, and I think I was in high school too, when he was a senior and I was a sophomore, or could have been, I think I was freshman actually. I think we're 2 years apart in age, but we're like 3 years apart in the schooling system. And like I said before, I love writing essays and things like that. And so for one of his English courses, he was supposed to write essays and stuff. And so he doesn't like it. So he started paying me to write them for him. Oh. And I did. I made quite a little bit of money just writing an essay.
Was it by the hour, by the essay?
It was more by the essay. And it wasn't much. Like as a freshman in high school, it was like $10 or something for a 5-page essay thing. So
yeah.
But yeah, I still enjoy it. So.
Yeah, that's funny. That almost He never tried to cheat you, like you had to write a 5-page essay and he gave you $1.
No, I mean, I wasn't dumb, Morgan.
Oh, okay. So I guess my stepbrother was dumb. I'd be like, hey, if you mow the lawn, I'll give you $1. And then like I'd get $10 for mowing the lawn.
That's slavery. That's child slavery.
Whatever. He loved it. He found it to be an appropriate wage and he was eager to do it. I don't know if I think that's perfect. That is perfect.
That sounds like Tom Sawyer levels of manipulation. Be like, I love painting this fence. It's a lot of fun. And he convinces the whole neighborhood to paint it for him. So
yeah.
All right. So my topic, smooth transition. My topic today is GMOs. Morgan, have you heard of GMOs?
Yes, I have. And I know very little about them, but I know that they are bad. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So do you know what GMO stands for? It's like an acronym.
I know. Well, okay. I could have guessed that, but no. Off the top of, I know that I've heard it many times, but I off the top of my head, I can't tell you what it is. What does it stand for?
Okay, so GMO stands for genetically modified organism.
Oh, duh.
Well, not duh, because usually
I think I'm thinking about something else. I think you are. I'm thinking
your past stuff. Confidence is now moot.
No, I'm thinking of, oh man, what are they called? I'm thinking of preservatives. That's MSG. Duh. Why am I thinking of? I'm thinking of things that are put in food that are like used as preservatives or prolong the life of food. And,
although, don't get me started on MSG.
Okay.
A lot of it's a travesty what MSG has to go through, but we're not going to focus on that right now.
Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. GMOs. Yes. Of course, I know what GMOs is. You have the power of editing to make that clear.
Yes, I will be sure to make you very smart in the edit. Don't worry. So GMOs apply to any sort of genetic modified organism, from bacteria to even animals and plants and things. But normally people associate them with, like you said, with food. They see some food and they see it's like, non-GMO certified or things like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just mostly when I'm talking GMOs, it almost always is going to be pertaining to the food industry and how the food treats GMOs and things like that.
Okay.
So basically, the food we eat today is very, very different from the food we were eating even like 100 years ago, but especially even before that, mostly because of selective breeding. So selective breeding is a thing we've been doing for probably like 10,000 years, if not longer, when we discovered agriculture. It's basically the process of finding a crop you think looks pretty good, and then finding another crop that looks pretty good too, and then you kind of breed them together.
Trying to get it to make more of pretty good looking crops.
Yes. You want to make more food, have it grow faster, have it grow bigger, and have it grow healthier. Like it doesn't die as much. We've been doing that for a very long time. And it actually works really well. The corn we have today looks nothing like the corn we had a few thousand years ago. One of my favorite kind of things to think about is that farms, when we think of farms or, rows of crops and fields, are very unnatural. Like you don't see that in nature.
Yeah, no.
Farms aren't supposed to exist, basically.
Yeah, that like the organization, like is that what you mean? Like how it's so structured a certain way, or it's so condensed of just one thing? It's not like natural and
yeah. It's like the rows of corn or whatever. If you look at a forest or a rainforest or anything like that, you never
completely random.
Yeah, you have a smorgasbord of different things, and they're all fighting to survive. Yeah. You never have these rows of food that are of only one type and that are full of food. Normally, if you go into a forest, you're not going to just find fruit laying around. You can find food, but it's really rare to find big, juicy apples that you can eat. In fact, crab apples are pretty much what apples are supposed to be. They're like really nasty and sour and gross. Yeah. And no one likes them. So about, I want to say, probably just over or under 100 years ago, we started learning more and more about genes, genetics, and actually it's pretty recent that we actually learned about DNA. Probably 60, 70 years ago, 1950s, we first started understanding, here are the building blocks, the blueprints of life is DNA. And ever since we discovered DNA, we've been trying to see how we can use that to our benefit. Mm-hmm. And what pretty much GMOs, the process, what they go through is we end up modifying the genes, usually the seeds of crops. It's very hard to modify an adult organism because it's already, fully formed. And we want them to have certain traits. So basically, it's almost like a shortcut. If you want a bigger, better apple, a while ago, or even today, what you do is you get apple trees and you breed them the biggest and sweetest apples, you get a better apple. It takes a long time though, because trees take a long time to grow, probably take many generations. Yeah. But with GMOs, you can pretty much do that pretty much instantaneously. I wouldn't say it's guaranteed, but you can very quickly say like, here are the genes for, size or for sweetness or whatever you want to do. And you can insert them and boom, you have a bigger, sweeter apple tree. And all you had to do was do one step.
Okay, and
so that's kind of what GMOs are.
Are you gonna? So that's what they are. Are you gonna get in the process of how that's done? Because like in my mind, that sounds like you're speaking gibberish. Like that's impossible. But the mind of somebody who knows little or remembers little of biology.
Yeah. So there are very specific processes, and there are many ways of doing it. But basically, one of the oldest ways we have is by using viruses. Viruses are very good at getting into cell membranes and injecting DNA or RNA and then having that genetic material read by the cell and then make whatever the thing says to make. So generally that's in humans, that's a bad thing, right? That's what viruses do. When we get let's say I have influenza, the flu virus. The flu virus is basically a protein shell with DNA in the middle. Mm-hmm. They're not even technically alive. They really don't do anything on their own. But so once they come into contact with the cell, what they just do is they just kind of shove that material in there. And your cell has mechanisms to read DNA. It has mechanisms to understand, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be making. I'm supposed to be making insulin, supposed to be making, proteins for my cell membrane, all these other things. And those instructions, they have little bits in there that fool your cell into thinking that it's its own instruction. And so this instruction says, make more of these things. And the cell's like, okay, I'll do that because that's what I'm being told to do. And the instruction says, make more of me, right? Make more virus shell proteins, make more of my RNA. And then after a while, the cell dies and all these viruses escape and the process continues. But what scientists have learned how to do is that you can take a virus, and the specifics are kind of boring, but basically you can modify the virus RNA so that it doesn't self-replicate. It doesn't give instructions to make more of itself. You instead give it instructions to make a very specific change in the cell. And so that they're called vector. That's called a vector. A vector is any kind of, you can kind of say like an infectious agent, sort of, that's able to infiltrate a cell and change its behavior or change its genetic makeup.
Okay, so if a virus, here's a question, little off topic than the route you were going, but if a virus it's not a living organism, you said it's basically a protein shell packed with this DNA, correct? And then it infiltrates the cell and distributes this DNA, causing different processes and things to change, which is how the cell or you result in being sick, correct? So does that just happen like coincidentally by chance, or like, because if it's not living, it's not like it has a motive to find somewhere to live and reproduce and just make life miserable, right?
Right, yeah. So basically viruses are kind of the thing that is on the edge of life and unlife.
Okay.
Because it acts kind of like life. It goes around. It seems, like you said, it seems to have a purpose. It seems to want something.
Yeah, because it seems like it's got its duty, and its duty is to make you sick. Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's more akin to a chemical, like basically poison. So there's poison in the world that if you take it, it'll cause reactions in your body that will kill you. Now, this poison, usually it's just a simple element like mercury, or it's a molecule like cyanide, and the molecule doesn't care. It's literally a combination of atoms, but it has properties in it that kill you. So I think viruses are much closer to that than a living thing.
Than something living.
Because
okay.
Yeah, because they just happen to have the right materials. They just happen to have the right way of getting in. And if they didn't, they would die, and then you wouldn't get sick. And so you only see the winners, right? You don't see all the losers who they fail to accidentally have the right proteins to enter a cell, and therefore don't get you sick.
And when you say die, do you mean that they're just not able to meet their destination, or like they dissipate?
Eventually viruses fall apart. They don't last forever. They can last a long time depending on their environment, but after a while, they'll just kind of, the chemical bonds that holds them together will fall apart.
Just fall apart. Okay.
Going even further on that, have you heard of prions? It's not a very common term.
It doesn't sound familiar.
So prions is what causes mad cow disease, basically. So what a prion is, it's even less lifelike than a virus. A prion is a protein that is in a very specific shape, the very specific wrong shape, and it has a special property where that if it comes into contact with another protein that is just like the same kind of protein but doesn't have the same shape, if it touches that protein, it automatically makes that other protein that same shape it is, and then therefore keeps propagating, and it is incurable. You cannot cure something of mad cow because it's not
like you can't reverse the reconstruction of that protein.
No, yeah, it is because as soon as it comes in contact, because the things that restructure those proteins are themselves proteins, it'll automatically destroy everything. So it's awful.
That sounds awful. And that's all prions.
That's all prions, yeah. Okay. So prions is just a misshapen protein, right? So again, it acts like a disease. It acts like something that is trying to kill you, but it's really not. It's just something that happens to have the wrong shape, the perfectly wrong shape, and then boom, it could kill you.
So you mentioned mad cow disease. Are there others that are kind of common? Because that sounds awful and horrible and would never wish it upon my worst enemy. Are there other instances that are common of that?
No, the prions are fairly uncommon.
Mad cow disease is just very recognizable. Like everybody's heard about it.
Everyone's heard of it.
Okay.
And And a human can get it in theory, and it has happened. And so basically, if you've been exposed to mad cow, if it's in your blood, you can still be saved. But if once it reaches past your brain, you're dead. There's nothing they can do for you.
Oh my gosh.
And so you just have to wait like a month until your brain just slowly converts into unusable protein mass.
Horrible.
It's horrible.
And are those proteins, the defective or the misshapen proteins, are those things that kind of, die off or fall apart, or are they kind of set in structure and once it's in you, it's going to travel and change everything?
Proteins are a lot more resilient to destruction. They can last a really long time, so basically the more simple a molecule or the more simple something is, the longer it can last in its state. So your body has natural mechanisms to destroy and recycle proteins that are either harmful or are no longer useful, but prions have abilities to escape them. If they didn't have that ability, they wouldn't be a disease. And so they just happen to have the ability to destroy the mechanisms that normally would destroy them and therefore are fatal.
God, that sounds horrible.
It's really scary.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Prions, it's just like an inevitable death. But yeah, so viruses, again, are a little more common than prions. But yeah, so anyway, so back to GMOs.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Recently, I say recently, it's probably within the last 15 years. I guess that's fairly recent in the science community. There's a process called CRISPR. I don't know if you've ever heard of CRISPR.
That sounds like something that was talked about in high school, but now I can't remember. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I have no idea.
I doubt anyone in my high school biology at least didn't go into specifics, but CRISPR is a very efficient way of modifying genes. So the virus way we had before, it was good. You had a decent chance of success. But a lot of times the body would recognize the virus and would kill it because it doesn't know, what the virus is going to do to it. Or the gene would be implanted into the DNA of the cell, but the gene, for some reason, either it mutated or something happened and it just didn't work. Or it didn't get in the right place. That's a big problem. So we discovered a mechanism from bacteria called CRISPR. Now, bacteria, their number one enemy are viruses. The vast majority of viruses in the world, they're called bacteriophages. I don't know if you've ever seen the model. They look like lunar landers. There's like a little head with little squid arms. That's actually how they look like, and usually they target bacteria. They just kind of land on the bacterial cell, and just the little head has all the DNA, just injects it, and the bacteria will die eventually and spread the cell. But some bacteria have their own kind of immune response where it'll have a mechanism called CRISPR. And what CRISPR is, it's an enzyme. And an enzyme that has a specific DNA sequence kind of embedded into it. And when it finds random DNA or RNA floating around it, it'll kind of latch onto it. And if it doesn't match the DNA it has, it'll let it go. Like, okay, you're fine. But if it matches the DNA, it'll start ripping and tearing apart that piece of DNA. So it destroys it. So these CRISPR things are basically antiviral DNA machines. They have little virus DNA encoded into them. And so if it finds a random virus DNA floating inside the bacteria cell, it'll grab it and rip it apart. And boom, you've prevented the virus from infecting you.
Okay, that's pretty badass.
It is. It's pretty cool.
But you're saying in general, viruses are the number one enemy to bacteria. So how common is CRISPR in bacteria then? Or does it just vary with whatever virus it's trying to defend against?
Yeah, it's one thing. It's very specific. It only is. Some of them they're only designed for one specific virus, viral like. And most bacteria, I say, bacteria have a lot of other antiviral factors or agents. So not all bacteria are just helpless, but this one came from E. coli. E. coli is one of the most common bacteria that scientists study, and we found this thing. And we're like, oh, cool, this is really neat. Okay. And so what researchers ended up doing is we ended up taking CRISPR out of E. coli, and we said, hey, this thing, all it's doing is finding a target DNA sequence and chopping it up. And so basically, we modified the CRISPR to have a DNA sequence that we want chopped up. And if we inject it into any cell, even like not even non-bacterial cell, human cells, animal, plant cells, whatever, if you inject it or put it near the nucleus of any cell, it'll find the DNA sequence we programmed it to find, it'll chop it up. And then basically what we do is we then give a similar segment of DNA to the nucleus so that the cell would put that in there to repair the hole that CRISPR made. And that's how we can then modify the genes of cells today.
That's how you put in whatever you want it to take in and repair itself with.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
The nucleus is like, oh my gosh, something just chopped me up. And so it has mechanisms to repair itself.
I was going to say, that sounds like a dangerous process, though. Like something that would very easily go wrong and the nucleus would just not be able to repair itself.
Exactly. And if the thing dies, it dies. You know, we're not doing it. We don't usually, like I said, we don't do it
That's
to adult
inhumane.
Animals. It's
the cell murder is still murder.
Cell murder. Cell rights are our rights. Exactly. But no, so...
but does it have a high success rate, or is it...
It has a very high success rate.
Really? See, because that's a scary sounding thing, too. I like this little Shop of Horrors podcast we got going. Everything's so scary. Chopping stuff up, ripping it apart.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, for context, your body has damage to its DNA all the time. Not just mutation. Mutation is a whole different thing.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes it'll replicate wrong. Sometimes it'll get damaged through physical. You know, maybe it'll be infected with a bacteria or virus, and it damages its own DNA, and the cell will try to survive. So cells have a lot of repair mechanisms for its DNA. It's not helpless. If DNA gets damaged, it'll do its best to repair it and survive. And normally the things we're modifying aren't life essential for the cell to live.
Okay.
We're not affecting the kind of DNA that in most animal cells and plant cells, there's a ton of DNA that is useless. It's called junk DNA.
Oh, it's actually called junk DNA.
It's called junk DNA. And because what happens a lot is when DNA replicates, there could be errors or there could be additions. Now, if you add a nucleotide to DNA, if it's in the right place, it won't do anything. It doesn't harm anything. It's just there. Uh-huh. And so it won't be removed. The body doesn't know something's wrong. So those will eventually build up. It'll just be billions of nucleotides that just literally don't do anything. Or sometimes they serve a purpose that isn't being read by DNA. Sometimes there's junk DNA that protects the DNA, because if there's a mutation, but it hits junk DNA, it's like a bulletproof shield. It didn't hit the actual DNA. It hit this thing, so we're good. So what we can do is we can target junk DNA sections, and so we just put our gene in there, and as long as the gene that we like has the right kind of sequence to indicate that, hey, I am now something that needs to be read and copied into a protein, that gene will be expressed. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we're not destroying life's essential genes in cells. We're just going for very, very non-essential things.
Well, I'm glad you cleared that up. I was very worried. I was very concerned.
And again, we're not injecting this into people, right? If you did it to people, yeah, that could be a problem. But we're injecting it into plant cells or plant seeds, even embryos, things like that. So, and CRISPR is super effective. We're really surprised how good it is at finding the right DNA, being very precise in where exactly it cuts that DNA up, and then the body's ability to repair that DNA using the materials that we gave it. Therefore, it expresses the gene that we want it to express.
Huh. Interesting. That sounds unbelievable. Oh, it's really incredible.
Science is just magic you don't understand yet.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's how I feel right now.
So this is before CRISPR, but one of my favorite examples of a GMO is basically in the 70s and 80s. I'm not too sure exactly when it was. I should probably look it up. But people who had diabetes before, they had to get their insulin from animals, essentially from pigs and horses that were slaughtered. Slaughterhouses would get their pancreas and try to get as much insulin as they can out of it.
I did not know that. I was going to say, how much does one horse bring?
Oh, very little. It's like basically if you slaughter, and usually in the United States, it's pigs, not horses, but horses too. I don't know why. I think for Jell-O, I don't know. But pig, basically, in order to get a cup of insulin, you had to slaughter like 1,000 pigs. You know, it's just...
What?
Insulin used to be very rare, very expensive, and it wasn't actually human insulin. It was pig insulin.
And how long ago are we talking?
This is like 40, 50 years ago. This is like 1970s, 1980s.
Okay.
This is the process we were doing.
Wow.
And sometimes people have allergic reactions because every animal has some slight variations on their insulin. And so people could have allergic reaction to the pig insulin or the cow insulin or whatever they decide to use on that particular person. And again, it was super expensive. It was astronomically expensive. So basically, if you had diabetes, you were screwed.
Yeah.
unless you were very wealthy. So the first thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make human insulin in a common way. And so what we do, and we do this today, is we genetically modified E. coli bacteria to make insulin. And that is where all of our insulin comes from today.
That's super interesting. So how were they able to do that? Is that through CRISPR, or what method, I guess, was used?
So this is pre-CRISPR. This is back in the 80s, but I think they just used a viral vector. Is pretty much you infected the E. coli bacteria with the viral vector, and you just encode it into the E. coli's DNA. Hey, also make human insulin, and it's easy because once that replicates, it'll also replicate that instruction, and so you don't even need to make that many to begin with. And so pretty much we have these E. coli farms that. Their job is we feed them sugar and protein and things like that, and all they do is make insulin,
produce
like little
insulin.
factories.
So we went from slaughtering 1,000 pigs for a cup of insulin to roughly what?
So roughly like a limitless supply of insulin, like as big as a container you want, as long as you have a big enough vat to house all these E. coli bacteria, you can have as many insulin. They'll make insulin until they die. That's kind of what these guys are doing.
That's way interesting.
So yeah, the insulin we have today is GMO insulin.
God, who would have thought science would make the world better?
Yeah, who'd have thunk it? Who would have thought?
I don't know. I'm still struggling to know if science is related to math, but
it is, unfortunately, less biological science, but it still is.
Sure.
So yeah, we can see how GMOs can be a really, really good thing. It can benefit society, and the problem with GMOs that people have is that, again, the public trust or the public view, if you tell them, hey, scientists in a lab, they messed with your tomatoes. Do you want to eat this tomato? They're like, no. It's a very natural thing to...
Because when you said GMO, the first thing my mind went to was food. And I guess because that might, specifically bad food, because that's a very common area for it.
Yeah, it's not the only area, but it's the area that consumers are most exposed to is like the food GMO industry.
Yeah, especially because the stuff you buy has like GMO label on it. Like, isn't there a symbol for it on packaging and stuff?
There's the GMO-free one, which is like the butterfly. That's pretty common.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the one I'm thinking of is ones that state that it is GMO-free.
And so there is a big, I say like push for being against GMOs right now. Like there's the whole organic industry, like, oh, this is organic certified milk or organic certified apples or whatever. And that always means that it hasn't been genetically modified.
Okay, I was going to ask you your opinion on that because a lot of the time I just think it's a scam. Like you're charging me triple just because it says organic, and how do I know if it's actually organic?
And that's the thing, yeah. If it's USDA organic, so I'm going to tell you. So organic is really hard because organic means life or living, and so in the labeling in the USDA organic, it means that the food was produced using a specific set of restrictions that usually prohibits certain types of pesticides.
I was going to say, pesticides. Certain
types of breeding methods, again, like no transgenic properties of food. Like GMOs and things like that. Now, it's funny because there's a very common misconception of GMO or organic means no pesticides, and that's not true at all. There are specific pesticides that they are allowed to use for it to be considered organic.
Really? I did not know that. I thought it meant no pesticides. Which also kind of pushes me away from organic, thinking that it means no pesticides, because that makes me think, oh, anything could have been in or around this fruit.
Exactly. There are places that offer non-pesticide food, but it's super expensive because your food's just being eaten by caterpillars and bugs and crap all the time.
Yeah, the turnover rate is incredible, I bet.
Yeah, so organic foods so you should still wash organic foods because they still have pesticides on them, just not the best ones, usually. And sometimes they don't. There's a very specific way of, and also herbicides too. Organic foods don't use specific types of herbicides, like glyphosate.
Now, what's an herbicide?
Herbicide is something that kills. It's a weed killer. It just kills other plants.
Killer. Okay. Yeah.
So generally, if you have a crop that is when we're trying to make GMO crops, the number 1 and 2 things we're doing is that we are trying to instill latent anti-insect properties into the crop. And herbicide properties into the crop.
So we want to be able
to use... Yeah, so there are many crops that have natural insecticides built within them and natural herbicides built within them. And we usually end up doing is we're grabbing those ones and inserting them into the crops that we want to have that expression.
That's interesting, because I can see why there might be a kind of negative mindset around that idea. I mean, it doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't. But neither does spraying poison on top of your food either. So it's just kind
of... but poison in my food or on top. I don't know. It just sounds like... I don't know.
So basically, the insecticides that we induce crops to make are... Ostensibly, they're not the same ones we spray on top of them.
I'd imagine.
In the same... Because, like, for example, let's say, like, trees. Trees have... very strong herbicidal properties, which is why when you see a tree, you normally don't see too many plants around them, except like grass. Because they kill everything that's around them. They don't like neighbors.
That's interesting.
But you can eat the apple from that tree, and it's fine because the expression of that gene isn't in the fruit. It's in the roots, and it's in the where the soil meets the plant. So it's not like your apple is full of insecticide. It's just happens to be part of a plant that is.
Okay, and the stuff that we're attempting to put inside the plant rather than spraying on top, that is also that would also be in the stem and root. It wouldn't be in the actual product, right?
It depends. Like if you get a potato, that's the root, or that's the tuber. And so not every GMO is the same. We don't insert the same gene into every crop. And so GMOs go through a lot of rigorous testing to make sure, hey, is the thing we're doing, is it going to hurt anyone? Is it going to produce anything weird? And so, yeah, there's a lot of testing for it. But yeah, you're right. Those are some of the concerns. People are concerned that, hey, if you're injecting other DNA material into my food, I don't like that. I don't want to eat it, which is fine. I mean, I understand that perspective as well.
Okay.
But there are things that we can do. So, for example, there's a crop called golden rice. And golden rice is just normal rice, except it's infused with vitamin A. And it gives it like a little orangey, carroty kind of color. In a lot of parts of Asia, vitamin A deficiency is a really big problem because they end up eating just rice and maybe some basic meat and beans and stuff. And they don't really eat carrots or other fruits that have vitamin A. And so golden rice is trying to become a thing. Like, so we eventually modified these rice plants to express vitamin A. Like it's just what we wanted to do. And in communities that have accepted it, it's been a huge boost. It's really good for people.
I'd imagine.
We fortify our milk with vitamin D. If you could just modify a cow to make vitamin D laden milk, and we'd save us some trouble, right? So that's kind of the mindset.
And then other than changing it to be more orangish, is there any other kind of property change to the rice?
The texture and the flavor is different, but in reality, vitamin A, like carrots are full of vitamin. That's why carrots are orange, is the beta carotene. So it's not a harmful thing. But yeah, again, people are concerned, quote unquote, about maybe their unintended consequences
because it's
to
unnatural.
Modifying. Yeah, because it's unnatural. Which is, I think, really ironic because for organic farming, there are acceptable methods of crossbreeding crops, right? There are other ways of doing it. So you can do the traditional where you get the two trees or whatever and they look good together and you make them. But there are other ones too. There is a method of inducing mutation into seeds that is organic, and it's through radiation exposure.
That one sounds a little more scary.
It does sound scary.
Yeah.
You get your seeds and you just blast them with gamma and UV or whatever. I don't know what, X-rays. And you're just going to randomly mutate the crap out of your seeds. And then you plant that seed and see what it does.
Just to see what it does?
Yeah, because sometimes those random mutations are really good and sometimes they're really bad. And so, yeah, that is an acceptable method of breeding for organic farming, is blasting your seeds with radiation, creating random mutation.
God, I'd be much more worried about that than any of the other methods. I don't know.
And I would agree with you. Yeah. I'd rather have someone who is purposely mutating my thing
than randomly attempting to,
giving it plant cancer, if you will.
And so I'd imagine wait, when you say random, do you mean like guess and check, or every single time they do it, even if they followed the same amount of radiation, it will just be different?
It's both. Every time you administer the same amount of radiation, it will literally become have different sites where it's mutated. And then they plant it, and then they check to see if it's going to kill you. And yeah.
Okay, so say they get a product they do like, can they then take and multiply that, like read it and recreate it again?
Oh yeah, they can.
Okay.
And that's where also GMO crops, they have that restriction, is if you have certain seeds or anything, you don't want those plants to reproduce with natural versions of it, because even though the genes we've approved are known to be safe, we still don't want like the random organic or unaltered crops to be affected by this gene. Because as soon as if that corn plant breeds with another corn plant, those inserted modified genes could be proliferated naturally, and then you can't really stop it. There are also mechanisms in those seeds that make sure that they don't get proliferated. So some of these seeds they make fruit, and then the fruit doesn't have seeds in them. They're sterile. So that way, that also prevents the spread of these modified genes.
Huh. That one, to me, just sounds the scariest.
The what one?
The radiation, just, I don't know, that freaks me out. It seems so bizarre to me.
There's a misconception of radiation, because I find that acceptable. I'm like, that's fine. I get it. We also use radiation to sterilize our food. A lot of our food has gone through radiation exposure, and it kills a lot of bacteria into it, and it's really safe.
That's interesting. Yeah, I and I'm not somebody who fully understands how radiation works. So, radiation in my mind, I think apocalypse. So it like immediately goes
you think of Fallout.
Say, yes, I think of Fallout. It immediately goes something negative.
Yeah, no, and that's another big thing is radiation. People think it's like poison. Like if you put poison in your apple, yes, if you eat the apple, you will die because it's poisonous. But if you irradiate your apple, that apple doesn't become radioactive.
No, it just is changing the DNA, causing reactions that.
Yeah, if you have an apple that you already plucked from the tree, it doesn't matter if you blasted radiation.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a difference once. Yeah, but like as it's growing in the seeds and whatnot. How common is that method compared to? Oh my gosh, what did you call it?
Like traditional crossbreeding?
Yeah, I guess either traditional crossbreeding or what did you call it? Now I'm completely drawing a blank. Just went brain dead for a second. The other method.
Explain. Like modifying the genes of the crop?
Okay, I don't know.
Or the
Never
X-ray
mind.
one or the radiation one.
Yeah. Okay. So how common is the radiation method in GMO? In GMO.
Okay, so the radiation method is not in GMO. It's in organic.
Okay, I am not saying what I am meaning to say. How common is radiation a method of, like compared to crossbreeding?
It's a lot more common.
Oh, it is a lot more common.
Because crossbreeding crops is really slow.
Oh, yeah, because it's really slow, yeah.
And so what you do is you have a lab and you have hundreds and hundreds of seeds, and you irradiate all of them, and then you plant them, and each of them will be different. And some of them will actually be dead. Some of them you've literally killed.
Yeah, they're just gone.
And then it's just gone. And then you look. So it's a process of creating hopefully beneficial mutations. So traditional crossbreeding is just too slow. Some people still do it, but it's not nearly as common. We've kind of reached because we've been crossbreeding for thousands of years, so we've kind of reached the limit of crossbreeding. We can't really do much more than we've done. So the next step is finding quote unquote strange ways of inducing change.
Yeah, new ways.
But anyway, that's my whole spiel. I'm a big proponent of modifying our crops to become better food. That is, most people aren't really aware of that. They just see GMO and they think it's but I'm a GMO enthusiast. I'd rather have good or better food.
Good or better.
For me. There's also like animals. So in Canada, there are types of salmon that they've modified to become really big. They grow really fast. They don't eat as much, and they have thinner bones, and so they can't really survive in the wild.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And so they produce a lot of salmon meat.
Is that then like the majority of farm-raised salmon then in Canada?
It's not the majority, no, because a lot of people are kind of skeptical of it. They're like, this is weird. And so, but it's usually used for like salmon, like if you get canned salmon or something, that's usually where it comes from.
That's usually what it is. Okay, but overall, compared to an actual fresh, natural salmon, how different is it really?
It looks really different.
Well, yeah, I'd imagine it looks really different, but I mean like nutritionally or like for your body. It's exactly the same, but like...
It's exactly the same because we're not altering, all we're doing is altering how fast it grows and the shape of it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the same processes that it goes through to generate, I say salmon meat, but it's muscle. Like these poor salmon are just trying to grow muscle, and we just see them as food.
Yeah.
The same thing with cows. With cows, cows don't exist in the wild. They're not a natural thing. Mm-hmm. They can't even live in the wild because they've been domesticated to the point where they're fat and they're slow and they're dumb and they don't even exhibit good herd behavior, and they're delicious. So imagine taking an animal and you can modify it with not in thousands of years, but in a few dozen years, and you get a similar outcome where you have this thing that is delicious, it's really easy to handle, and it's made for human consumption, right?
That's exactly what they've done with the salmon.
Yeah. Another thing they did with salmon is they made them almost all female, so that they cannot breed with one another, and they're sterile. So they cannot breed with the outside populations in case one did escape. They're not going to spread that completely gene into the
destroy an entire population.
I mean, yeah.
Eventually,
exactly so.
Yeah.
Eventually,
that'd be they were thinking ahead on that one.
Well, yeah, the thing.
Wonder how many salmon they had escape before they thought to do that.
I'm pretty sure they did that before. These people are kind of smart. They're aware that animals
they're
breed,
kind of smart. Yeah, they're Canadians. So
they might know what they're doing. Oh, wow.
It's a joke. Let's not all get offended. Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's interesting. Power of editing can take my racism away.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. That's something
that you will do. Yeah.
I kind of wish we could.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, yeah, I want to hear your opinion on that. And okay, well, I guess before I get your opinion, has there ever been anything attempted?
Yes.
Okay. And what was it?
So, in the United States, we have done many tests on, especially with CRISPR.
That's what it was that I couldn't remember. Freaking CRISPR.
Oh, yeah, CRISPR. So CRISPR is the method.
I kept wanting to say like trippy or something. I was like, I know that's not
swifty.
Right. Yeah, it's swifty. Yes. Okay, so yeah.
So we've used CRISPR to modify human embryos and eggs, but we've never let them come to term before. We've always terminated them, I think, before 7 weeks. That's like the U.S. guideline. So we've never actually seen one grow up in the United States.
That's freaky.
About 2 or 3 years ago in China, they quote unquote illegally made some CRISPR babies, and they allowed them to be full term, and now they're little toddlers running around.
So what did they modify? So
they modified a gene that would prevent them from getting cancer. So they modified a proto-oncogene, like we talked about last time. So that they wouldn't have cancer. But also, this is also very theoretical because intelligence is something we're not really good at determining if genes are, or which genes are responsible for intelligence. But they also modified some genes that would, in theory, help them become more intelligent.
That's really interesting.
That's a lot less solid than the cancer stuff they did, but... So I'm all in favor of modifying human embryos to prevent diseases. Because even right now, if you're 4 or 5 months pregnant, they can literally look at the little fetus and say, hey, that kid has Down syndrome, or hey, that kid's going to have a severe, going to be blind or whatever. Mm-hmm. And as genetic tests get better, we can pretty much determine as an egg if something's going to have a disease, and then we can modify that egg so it doesn't have it before it even grows, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm in favor of that.
So these embryos that were in the United States, you said they were terminated before they could get to a certain point?
Yeah, they're normally fertilized out in a lab somewhere, and they're kind of cultured.
Are they just from donors that they just create in a lab? Basically.
So basically what happens is some of that happens. Usually these aren't created for the specific purpose of research. When people go for sterility treatments, like in vitro fertilization, generally what doctors will do is that they will implant about like a dozen eggs into a female, because the vast majority of them will die. And so usually only 1 or 2 actually attaches. But sometimes a lot of them attach. If you see Octomom is not natural. She had in vitro fertilization, and she opted not to get rid of some of them. She opted to keep all of them. So, but generally, they're like, hey, we implanted this many. You got 6. You probably don't want 6, so we can take out 5 or 4 of them, and then boom. So they take them out, they remove them, and then they just shove them in a freezer somewhere. And after like 3 or 4 months, they die because they can't live that long. And so what researchers, for a while we were doing, but under specific administrations, they've paused and resumed and paused again, depending on U.S. law, is just taking those ones who are going to die anyway and then conducting very simple experiments on them and then then they die naturally as they get too old.
Okay.
But it would be very easy for us to modify eggs and other cells and implant them and let them grow into children. That is not the issue. We can totally do that.
The issue is just legal issues.
Yeah. The doctor that did it in China was...
by the Chinese government?
By the Chinese government,
okay, because my next question was going to be, why did China do it? How did they get away with it? And is there just some sort of worldwide moral standard or administration that's decided these laws?
So there's a worldwide standard, but there's no actual... Like the WHO, the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
That is, like, we say things, but you're under... If China does it, the international community can kind of shun them or say bad boy and slap their wrist, but they can't really do anything about it. So in China, it is illegal. So there's a conspiracy or whatever you want to call it. There's a thought that maybe the doctor was ordered to do it. But then when it was discovered that he did it, China had to make an example of him and kind of imprison him. But we don't. They claim that he did it on his own, that he wasn't told to do it. You never know.
Yeah.
But internationally, it's common for people to have the opinion that you should not let them come to term.
That's insane. And you said that there's a couple of them?
Yeah, they were twins. I think they were twins.
And are they like being monitored or followed in some way?
Oh yeah, they're like living anonymously. I don't even know if they or their family knows who they are.
Really?
Yeah, because what are you going to do?
I'm sure the government's observing them. It's
the government is very, especially communist China. They're very protective of those things.
Yeah.
And the scientific communities are like, well, now that they're born, we might as well look what happens, right? Like, they're here.
They're like, hey, that guy was executed. We don't have to worry about him. We'll see what his experiment turns out to be.
A lot of old timey science was done that way. It's like horrible things were done, but now that they were done,
now that it's done, we'll see how long he lives before he bleeds out without medical attention.
Yeah, the United States is definitely not exempt from this type of behavior.
I'm sure.
We did some very horrible things.
Not too long ago.
Well, like 50, 60 years ago, I would say.
Don't want to get into that?
Well, we can, if you want. I thought you had something that you wanted to discuss.
No, not in particular. Nothing along these lines. So yeah, I want to hear what we have, our sins in the closet.
So I'm trying to think. It's not... So basically, I think it was after World War II. So either in the 30s or in the 40s and 50s, there was a few government projects that would purposely infect people with syphilis and and herpes and determine what the effects were long term of that. And normally these people were black.
Wow.
You
said post World War II.
I think it could have been in the 30s. I'm not too sure. There's also like forced sterilization going on, things like that. Again, usually to minority populations. There was MK Ultra, where we unknowingly gave people LSD to see what the psychological effects of them were.
Wait, how do we unknowingly give people LSD?
Well, the person participating doesn't know they're getting it.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the people that were...
we were accidentally
Yes, we mistakenly gave people LSD, and we're like, whoops, I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we gave LSD to Vietnam soldiers in Vietnam to see if it'll affect combat.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah, and it's documented. There was a chemist who committed suicide in I think either the 60s or 70s because he had been part of a CIA group of administering LSD, I think once or twice a week, and he just couldn't take it, and he just jumped off a building. Or he was thrown off the building. Again, no one's too sure, but he was like a doctor, right? He was a very educated family person.
He was administering or being administered to?
He was being administered. He claimed, not he claimed, but people who were doing the experiment claimed that he knew what was happening to him. They didn't do it without his consent, but he obviously was not dealing with it very well.
No.
So MK Ultra is MK Ultra is the conspiracy theory I thought was ridiculous until I learned it was true, and that kind of changed my mind on it. So
the truth changed your mind on it.
As it should. Yes.
Yeah.
Like if you told me, a while ago that. Not even a while ago when I was younger, that the U.S. government was giving LSD to random people to see what it did, I would have been like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, maybe not.
They used it also to interrogate people. If they were people who they thought were communists or committing treason, they thought it would be some sort of truth serum, and they would give them high doses of LSD.
I've heard that before. But I've never heard it as like experimentation for combat in soldiers, but that's
they were wondering if soldiers would be able to resist pain or trauma.
God,
it wasn't like evil.
I don't know. That still sounds sketchy. I mean,
it's super sketchy.
Not just the principle of giving somebody LSD to see if they're a better combatant, but like, I don't know. I just feel like that would put a lot of people's lives at risk.
Oh, it'd mess people up.
Yeah,
like some people horribly. Have permanent damage.
Yeah, not just temporarily, but forever. So
I mean, 'cause imagine being in a horrible war zone, but you're tripping balls while you're doing it. Like,
oh, dude, that reminds me of Wolfenstein. Did you ever play Wolfenstein?
The newest one or the old one?
Well, the most recent 2.
Yes, I did play those.
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 different routes that you can go. You can either save one guy or you can either save the young American or the Irishman. And if you save the young American, he like takes LSD and he like chases a trippy little lizard in certain missions and like, God, that made me think of that and how it would like pump him up and stuff, or like kind of help with his PTSD. As well.
Now I will say psychedelics have shown a pretty incredible therapeutic ability to help with PTSD.
Now, when you say psychedelics, you don't mean things like LSD, things much...
No, not in particular LSD. It's like psilocybin, which is what's in magic mushrooms. That has a lot of potential. We've been discovering more and more of its therapeutic properties. The one downside of it, well, there are many downsides to MK Ultra. MK Ultra, when the general public found out, there was pretty much a law banning all research on illegal drugs, which is why we don't know if any of these drugs have actual benefits properties to them. And now we're kind of getting to the point where we're starting to kind of lift those up. So because before at certain universities, you can have these professors and researchers, and they were literally taking tons of cocaine and LSD and stuff, and seeing the benefits and or horrible side effects of them, and recording their discovery. Like you could in the 70s, you could literally be a college student and sign up to take LSD to see the effects on you, which is kind of crazy to think about.
That's nuts.
But yeah, that was before all this kind of blew up in their face.
So when you say things are changing now, are you talking about like medical marijuana and stuff like that, or
basically, because right now when you want to conduct an official study on the benefits of something, you have to kind of submit your overall plan to a board of professors, a board of people essentially who's going to fund your project, and they have to see if it's ethical, if it's going to actually yield good research and all these other things.
If it's worth an investment.
If it's worth the investment. And almost every time, if it involves hurting someone, they will say no. He's like, hey, like for example, they decided like, oh, does cracking your fingers give you arthritis? We don't really know, because it's hard to say, hey, we want you to crack your fingers or your joints for 10 years.
To see if you get arthritis.
Tell us if you get arthritis. Exactly.
Wow, that's interesting.
So yeah, the study cannot knowingly do something that might induce harm.
God, that seems like it would be any study though.
Not necessarily. Because if you're trying to study a new painkiller, the purpose of the painkiller is not to induce pain.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you have negative side effects, that's okay, because that's what we're trying to find. But if you have a pill that induces pain and we're trying to see if it works, that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
no.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. But I don't know. Maybe just the level of pain developing into arthritis over 10 years of like the example of cracking knuckles. That just seems so minor to me that like anything else could be rejected easily.
Also, arthritis is permanent.
Yeah.
That's the thing too. If you can have side effects from a pain pill, it'll go away. But if you have permanent arthritis from being part of this study, that is different.
Yeah,
like cancer.
I get you. I could see why investors don't want to be a part of that. But
So in research with drugs, they're like, hey, we want to give people marijuana. And for the longest time, they're like, no, we don't want to give people marijuana.
I was going to say like 20 years ago, I swear a minor marijuana bust is like a major cocaine bust today. Like I feel like it had that same gravity.
It did. And to be fair, there were a few times where they were approved. Sometimes it's really surprising, but sometimes they did approve certain studies with illegal substances. You just got lucky. But for the most part, they just didn't want to be a part of it. And it's not always. Sometimes there were studies that were done that did actually harm people, but the people who decided on approving it said that it was worth it. So it's not a blanket statement. It's just in general, you don't want to induce harm. Which is why sometimes you'll randomly find a study from the 70s or 80s that talks about LSD or cocaine or marijuana because randomly they were approved. But now, especially outside the United States, a lot of countries are being more open and receptive to basically illegal substances that can be beneficial. That's like Canada It wasn't yesterday. It was this week. It was really, really recently. They approved for terminal cancer patients to try magic mushrooms.
Oh, really?
And just like this is like Canadian federal government, and they're like, oh, cool. And so, yeah.
You know, if I was a terminal cancer patient, I don't think I would wait for approval if I was interested.
And that's exactly the thing. People were like, hey, everyone's doing it. Anyway, you might as well. And in the States, it's more complicated. Every state has its own laws. Like Colorado, Denver, they decriminalized psilocybin, which means you can't get arrested for it, but it's not allowed.
So psilocybin, you said, is one of the hallucinogenics, or it is magic mushrooms?
Yeah, it's the hallucinogenic.
The actual name of it. It'd be interesting. I don't know. Never mind. I was gonna say something that's probably unethical.
Oh, just say it.
No, I was gonna say like if there are studies that wanted to be done on some of the harder drugs to people that are already taking them, but then that's kind of like you taking advantage of an addict for the purpose of
And that's exactly right. Even which is like you can observe them, but even observing them could promote their behavior, and so it's not a good route to go. You're doing cocaine. How about you do even more cocaine to see how you react to cocaine? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no.
So pretty much what we do is we go to people like rehab clinics, and there's 30 people who have been on cocaine, and we ask them, hey, while you were on this thing, which we had no control over you, how did you feel? And so that research isn't quite nearly as beneficial, but at least it's something. And so those are where the most of the studies come from. It's just asking them their past experience.
That's interesting. Probably not the most reliable.
Exactly.
Well, not reliable, but probably not the most beneficial.
Yeah, you're right. It's not the most beneficial because the best studies are ones that are set up properly. And that's why these boards exist, is because they also want to make sure that your study is set up right.
Exactly.
Because if you're trying to do a study and be like, hey, I want to give people, let them eat paint and see what they do. You gotta be all right.
You need a control group that doesn't eat paint, Billy. Come on, man.
You need non-paint eaters. Yeah. You need different kinds of paint.
Don't just start giving paint to everybody.
And they even get very specific, like you need people who aren't the same age, right? Because if you're just going to a university and doing it, they're all going to be university age. You need older people to do it too. So you need a broad population. I was going to say children. Probably don't make children eat paint.
I was going to say it's a study that's super beneficial to anybody around 25, but over 30, it just kills you. It's just approved. That's super interesting. I guess I've never really thought about different hard drugs and how like different benefits that potentially could be there, but the kind of difficulties in studying that.
Yeah, it's really difficult, especially since you can, like with prescription painkillers we have today, you can abuse them and you can get high off them, but they still have legitimate medical purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you take too much, you feel great and it's bad for you. But basically heroin, almost the exact same thing as morphine. does the same thing to you. It's just when you're administering morphine, you don't give them a whole lot. You give them a little. You're doing heroin, you do a whole lot of heroin, right? So it feels great.
Repeatedly.
And so it'd be kind of, I'd wonder if we had done these studies on these things, if we could find, and I'm pretty sure we could, fairly beneficial. Maybe if you take just the right amount of cocaine, it's a good antidepressant. I don't know, but you don't take enough to get high, right? You just take very little.
That still seems like a slippery slope that could lead into like something similar to the opioid pandemic. Like, exactly. If we all of a sudden approve cocaine, but you can only take a little, everybody's like, oh, okay, I'll only take a little. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Might reduce a bit of drug crime, but probably not good overall.
Hey, if we can get taxes from it, it's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just approve everything so we can tax it all, regulate it all.
There are legitimate places that want to do that. They want to decriminalize everything. See the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Not quite everything, but a lot of things.
Yeah, but a lot of things. It makes me think of that show Murder Mountain that you recommended to me, and how all those guys that went legal trying to do their little kind of, I want to say they were kind of like mom and pop weed businesses, like small time weed businesses, just all the taxes and regulations and licensings and all that different stuff they were hit with, where to the point where they almost couldn't survive, and it almost made things more dangerous because of how cutthroat the industry was and how dangerous it was to try to be illegal where it's 100 times more profitable than being legal. It's interesting how legalization and throwing or ability to collect taxes on things can just, screw up everything as well. And make things worse. Problem is I don't know. That show is an interesting perspective of legalization for some things sounds great. Being able to collect taxes on things that people do that maybe to you are bad, that sounds awesome. But then I don't know, all the aftermath from that and that show was really interesting to see. That gave me a perspective I would have never thought about.
And I feel like in that show in particular, it kind of shows you that mom and pop pot farms aren't commercially viable if they're going to be legal.
No, they were taken over by big guys.
Eventually, you're going to have big, and that's what happens today. It's very hard to find a little family-owned farm, but you can find agricultural companies that own, acres and acres of crops. And it's because it's more economically beneficial to do it that way. So I feel like as marijuana becomes more and more legal in more places, you're going to find, big weed, I don't know if we're going to call them big pot. They're going to become a thing, right? It's like big everything else exists. Big, there's big music industry, big agriculture, big whatever.
Kind of
big
monopolize.
Got milk.
We should start a weed farm and call it Big Pot.
Big Pot.
Be awesome.
I think it'd be a smart investment to invest into marijuana farms. I think it's really going to start exploding in the next decade or so. So
I don't doubt it.
Financial advice from Jeremy.
Yeah,
put money into weed farms.
We've actually, where I work, I'm in construction. We've actually built a few dispensaries out of state.
Oh, cool!
So it's been interesting to see them pop up. It's funny because we have a lot of guys that are younger that when we got contracted to do these dispensaries, they were like super excited. I don't know if they thought they were gonna like get a discount at the dispensary.
Sample the merchandise.
Hey, I built this place. Like, give me a discount. But no, stuff like this is popping up all over the place. So I don't doubt it that in the next 10 years or so, things are going to be way different than when it all started to go legal in the majority of places.
Yeah, I think there's a certain sense of excitement when things like that happen, because when I hear that, like, we're building this, distillery or whatever. I think like, oh, that's cool, right? I'm a young, I guess, quote unquote, a young person that gets excited. I'm like, that's really interesting. I want to see how this goes. Whereas you get people of a different generation, in general, maybe, I don't know. They're like, oh, this is a bad thing. I don't want to see this. I'm like, well, you're old, but some young people agree and some old people agree.
Yeah. I don't know. I try to stay away from the devil's grass. I think
devil's grass.
Okay, here's my drug story. Are you ready?
I am definitely ready.
So I think the strongest thing I've ever taken was an Oxy, and I went to the doctor because I had this hollow sensation that was like near my kidney, but it wasn't, and it was a really weird sensation. It was there for weeks, and I was really concerned.
Sensation?
It was a hollow sensation, so it didn't hurt, but it felt like I had this empty spot in my stomach, and they told me it was likely a muscle issue. And I was like, okay, well, it's a little bit weird because the year prior, and it was actually right around September, so maybe it'll happen again this year. So it happened last year, and it happened the year before that. And both times they told me it was a muscle issue. So I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy and it's all in my mind. Anyways, the second time I went, they were like, it's got to be a muscle issue. You probably pulled something in your stomach and it feels hollow. And I'm like, but I'm not like sore. I'm not aching. Well, they gave me Oxy. It was like very quick and like I couldn't believe how easy. It was kind of disturbing. Anyways, the next day, I'm getting ready to go to church, right? It's a Sunday. And I'm getting this sensation and it kind of hurts. Like I was like, okay, maybe it's a muscle pain. And they're like, they told me to take one even if it didn't hurt just to see if it would help get the sensation away. I
knew what your mind was.
No. Listen.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay, this is the only time I've ever taken it.
You're just boring. You need a little...
I took it, and it was not a big dose, and I don't know how doses work or how you should feel, because my understanding is opioids, usually after like a week of taking them, is when they get really addictive and very reactive in your body. But I took one and I felt like I was flying in church. And I'm sitting there with a hymnal reading the words to the song, and I can feel my hands start to levitate before me. And I'm like, whoa, my hands are lifting up. And I dropped the hymn book, and like the hymn book fell, and in my mind it like broke through the floor. And I got scared that I had done something bad. And like, I had to go home because I felt sick. So we left. That was like a year ago. That's my one experience with drugs. And then I took a nap and I woke up and I was fine. But I was seriously scared out of my mind. It was a weird reaction. It was a very small dosage. I did not take another one. And oh, yeah, doctor's orders. I should have just done it. But it was scary. So I don't think that's a normal reaction to painkillers, because from what I understand, they're addictive the longer you take them and like more reactive. But yeah, I don't know. It was bizarre. So I'm very weary on medicine and pills. I try not to.
Little Morgan got a little high. That's okay.
Yeah, okay. Hey, yeah. I did, and it felt
great.
No, it didn't feel great. It was scary.
Well, didn't feel good because you didn't want it, but I'm pretty sure if you
wanted it, that would have been a good reaction. Yeah. That would have been what I was seeking.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
When it comes to drugs, like if you're accidentally given meth, it's a horrible thing, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure.
Like, that would be the worst thing ever.
I'm sure. I hope somebody can accidentally give me some mushrooms someday. So
okay. Give you like a brownie. I don't know what they put mushrooms in. A cookie or something where they
I didn't think they put it in anything. I thought they just straight up ate them like dried mushrooms.
I'm not too sure, but I think, we usually just eat them. But like, I just think about eating like a plain normal mushroom. It sounds pretty gross, and so I think they don't taste good. Then when one gets a handful of dried marijuana, and just shoves it in their mouth. Yeah, right?
They probably taste like death. It's probably horrible. But yeah, well, this has been.
There's your story.
Been very There's my 2 cents. It's been interesting. I'm gonna be very weary now of GMO children in China.
Just look it up. You read all about them.
I'll have to look it up.
Little face. Their superpowers are going to emerge soon.
Wait, so they're supposed to be anonymous, but you can actually like look up.
No, they're supposed to be anonymous. Okay. I'm just kidding.
Okay, I was going to say I can actually see a picture of them. Now,
I mean, I don't know.
Now, anybody who says different, I think, is a liar. But Yao Ming has to be an experiment.
Tall people exist. He has a
okay,
genetic.
But
mutation.
But that tall and from that region.
He had a pituitary problem.
Sure. Sure.
And then they fixed it. What?
Yeah, I think that's true.
Have you ever heard of the world's tallest person ever?
I'm pretty sure in like Ripley's Believe It or Not, when I was like 7.
There's a tallest person alive today, but the tallest person that ever lived, his name was like Ralph Waldo or something.
Yeah, that sounds familiar, actually.
I mean, something like that. Not Waldo Emerson. I'm not even thinking of a famous artist, but it's something with a W, something with an R. Something. But he was born, I think, in the 20s or 30s. I think it was. There are black and white photographs of him, so maybe even. But he was like 8'9".
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, he was almost 9 feet tall, right?
Yeah, he was almost 9 feet tall, but then he died really young because he had a problem, right? He had a pituitary problem.
Huh. Interesting.
He died when he was like 24, 25. It's really sad.
That is super sad.
People with pituitary problems now, we can they discover it because they get really tall, and then we can surgically fix it so they don't die from it.
Huh.
But they're still really tall. There's a guy from Ukraine, I think, who right now is the tallest person alive.
Huh.
He looks really weird. It's kind of.
Do you know what it is that the pituitary gland it's what causes the height growth, the defect?
Yeah. So what it does, it just keeps producing HGH, which is human growth hormone, which normally your pituitary gland produces when you're going through puberty and when you're growing, and it has mechanisms that stop it around the age of 25, although normally it slows down significantly after 18, 19. But some people, it's just either they have a tumor on their pituitary gland so that the tumor prevents the off switch from being flicked on, or the pituitary gland, they have a genetic mutation where they just have it on all the time. And so they just keep growing and they don't stop. And the problem is that HGH affects certain body tissue more than others. And so their bones and their flesh and their other things grow really quickly, but their circulatory system does not. And so what ends up happening is that their heart has a really hard time pumping blood to their feet. And so that's what he died of. He died of a foot infection. He got a cut in his foot, and his body just couldn't handle.
Oh, really?
Yao Ming has had foot problems. He had microfractures all over his feet. That's why he retired, because his body just couldn't heal it. It couldn't heal his feet because they were too far away for blood to properly get to it.
That's crazy. I imagined it was something like his heart couldn't keep up with the large size of his body, but it was actually his heart couldn't help fix an issue.
Essentially, yeah. And it's also that too. They have a higher chance of getting a stroke or clots because the blood flow in their legs is just poor. Too slow, too poor, things like that. So yeah.
So had he not died, he potentially could have grown indefinitely until his circulatory system just quit.
Yeah, just pooped out.
Wow.
Yeah, it could have been his heart just exploded or something.
That's crazy. That's really interesting.
It's a shame.
Yeah. That's horrible.
So yeah, I think Yao Ming literally had a pituitary problem, and then they got it fixed. But by the time they fixed it, he was over 7 feet tall, so you might as well give him a basketball and put him in the NBA.
Sounds like a good solution to a conspiracy theory.
I gotta look. I don't know too much about Yao Ming. I'll have to look it up. Maybe he.
You know a lot more than I did.
It could be that he didn't have. I don't know. It could be he's just super tall, but I don't
superhuman experiment.
I wouldn't. The Soviet Union they were trying to make humanzees. You ever heard of those?
Yes, I have.
They're trying to mix chimpanzees and humans.
That's freaky. That's weird.
That is kind of freaky.
It's really weird.
That's some Planet of the Apes stuff.
Yeah, I don't like the Soviet. Wouldn't want to be there. What kind of a scientist would you'd have to be mad?
No, you just have to be very curious.
No, okay, don't justify that with curiosity. That's horrible.
It is curiosity. What are you talking about? They don't have to be crazy. What?
Okay, I think they'd have a touch of crazy.
I mean,
a hint of it.
I think you need a flexible moral compass, but you don't have to be
flexible
moral
compass. Yeah. That's all it requires.
If you told me, hey, there's an experiment that might kill a monkey and a person, but it'll cure, AIDS, I'd be like, yeah, do it right now. For sure.
That was kind of a
do
funny
it twice
way to put
to be
it.
Sure.
Take two of them.
Take two, yeah.
Yeah.
Mash them all together.
Pick a card, any card. Okay. I think my brain's at its limit tonight.
All right.
Well, cool, man. I just very informed. Once again, I am learned.
I'm glad that a very reliable source of proper information.
Of learnedness.
Give you learnedness.
Oh, yeah.
Everything I say is 100% true. It's infallible fact.
Oh, believe me.
Don't look it up.
Believe me.
Don't even bother.
People say I'm gullible. I just say that I believe everybody. So that was a little cringe. Delete that.
Yeah. Don't worry. Already in my mind, it's deleted.
Wow. Well.
But, all right, Morgan. I appreciate this time. It's been great talking to you. Lots of fun.
It's been wonderful. Thank you. I look forward to the next one.
For sure. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Maybe I'll bring some sustenance to the table.
Yeah, maybe. It's not necessary, but I appreciate it.
Maybe. I've got some ideas. Some ideas coming in the future.
All right, man. Sounds good.